What is up, and welcome into the very first edition of JR Weekly. My name is Jeff Ratcliffe, thus the JR in the weekly. And we will be coming to you throughout the course of the NFL season here on Fridays weekly to break down the world of football, and in particular with an eye on sports betting. I'm a player props guy, so that's my angle here. We're not really going to be talking about betting game lines, betting over-unders, things like that. I want to key in on the players, and we are going to go through each game every single week. I'm going to give you a prop bet that I like, and of course, if you want more prop bets that I like, I think I have over like 900 plus up right now, graded from best to worst across multiple sports books. Whatever state you're in, we probably have the sports book for you there. Over at ftnbets.com, make sure you get in over there right now and get a discount. I like discounts because I'm cheap. Ask my wife. I'm very cheap. Rat Pack is the promo code, R-A-T. I don't need a second T, P-A-C-K. Rat Pack, promo code. Get yourself a discount over there. And you can also use that over at ftnfantasy.com because, of course, I am a fantasy guy as well. And you can get my rankings over there at ftnfantasy.com, plus all the amazing tools that we have. ftnbets.com, ftnfantasy.com. Let's dive into it. And, every week, yes, I do want to go game by game, but I also want to talk about some of the biggest news. And wow, Baltimore, wow, brutal. In successive plays yesterday at practice, the Ravens lost both Gus Edwards and Marcus Peters. I don't think I can ever remember anything like that happening, much less on the heels of J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill also out for the season for Baltimore. What the heck do you do? I know, hey, if you're watching this right now, you may be interested in player prop betting, but you probably play fantasy as well. If you're following me, what the heck do you do? What do you do? Honestly, I'm at a loss. Because, yes, Tyson Williams is there. And, yes, Tyson Williams is projecting out as the top back this weekend. But what about beyond that point? Because we know the team, well, they signed Le'Veon Bell and Devonta Freeman to their practice squad, not to the active roster. They signed Trenton Cannon and Latavius Murray to the active roster, along with Tyson Williams there. One would have to figure that eventually, if it's not a full-blown timeshare between all of them, with Trenton Cannon largely being a passing down back, Latavius Murray might have the edge here. But it's going to take a little bit of time, and I wouldn't expect anything this week. Now, also remember, if you picked up Le'Veon Bell, that probably is not going to work too well in fantasy football. Le'Veon Bell, Harbaugh came out today and said of the newly acquired backs or newly signed backs, he's probably the least ready to go. Freeman more ready to go. Murray more ready to go than Le'Veon Bell. And also, let's not forget, if you're on the practice squad, it's not like minor league baseball. You don't get called up to the big leagues from the practice squad. You can be called up to the active roster. 1 week, you immediately go back down. It's an automatic transaction that is right back down to the practice squad. Next week, it can happen twice. Automatically back down. If you are brought up a third time, the team actually has to sign you to a 53-man, to the 53-man, so an actual contract at that point. This is sort of, teams can't take advantage of the practice squad rules, but just because you're on a practice squad doesn't mean anything. So it's a brutal situation. I feel for Gus Edwards, who was right there. This was the season for him. And, of course, Marcus Peters. But the show, of course, goes on. And I'm not actually going to talk about Monday's game on the show today because I will be back on Monday with another live stream. We'll preview a lot more bets for Monday Night Football every single week from yours truly. But let's dive into the games. And we're going to start, hey, I'm in the Philly area. So let's start with Philadelphia, Atlanta. Man, I love this game. And it's for me, an intriguing matchup between two new head coaches, two changing regimes, two teams with some very interesting players, high pedigree rookies in Devonte Smith and Kyle Pitts. You have obviously the whole scenario with Jalen Hurts and what does he do as a full-time starter for this team? And the backfields. The backfields are really weird, aren't they? Mike Davis, what the heck's going on there? Is he really a feature back? Are we buying that? I mean, it has to be essentially in week one, but what are we doing there? Of course, Miles Sanders, is his role transitioning to more of an early down runner, not as much in the passing down? A lot of those questions still unanswered, but I tell you what, here's a question that I do have answered. Is Devonte Smith good? Yes! He's freaking awesome. Did we not watch last year? Now, I know it's a college level. It is. But this dude is a dog. This dude is an animal. I don't care what he weighs. He's an animal. And when I see a prop line for him at 42.5 receiving yards, give me the over. Now I'm looking at that right now, 42.5 at -115 on DraftKings. And if you are new to player props, but you're a fantasy person, maybe you're checking in right now because you know me from SiriusXM or what have you, or obviously with FTN as well, player props is the way to go. And I was once in your shoes. A few years back when I was just starting out in the industry, back in the early 2010s, I was not the most confident when it came to sports betting. Not at all. I minus what? Plus what? I don't want to bet on teams. I know players. So I was really reluctant. I'm not as reluctant these days, but if you're a fantasy player, player props is that natural transition. When I first found out about it, I was like, oh, I can get down with that. That I understand. Over or under a receiving yard line, that's my wheelhouse right there. It's a very natural transition. I know the American odds are a little weird. What does minus this, plus that mean? It's a lot more complicated, or it's a lot less complicated than it actually sounds. Not the other way around. It's not really that complicated. And you get the hang of it pretty darn quickly. So if you're in a location where you can bet, you're in a legal state or you're close to a legal state, player props, it's the way to go. Just start dabbling a little bit. And every week, I got you covered here with these plus what we have over at ftnbets.com. But yeah, Smith, over. Against that secondary, over. I love that play right there. Now, I think A.J. Terrell, by the way, if you're a Falcons fan, don't be screaming at me right now. Don't at me on Twitter. Because I think A.J. Terrell he could be a good pro. He could be a really good pro. But I still want to go after this. And Smith is in a position where he can eat from a target volume standpoint. So really like that play right there. Let's move on to the next game on my list, Pittsburgh and Buffalo. Wow, this is a sexy little matchup right here. It is in Buffalo. It's a tough matchup for Josh Allen. If you're a fantasy person, no. That's the answer to your question. Should I bench Josh? No, don't bench Josh Allen. You didn't draft this dude in the third round to be all the way here in week one to bench the guy. Come on. Come on. He's an every week starter. Set and forget. Don't care who he's playing against. Pittsburgh's defense pretty good, but I don't care who he's playing against. But I want to key in on the other side of this matchup for player prop purposes because all eyes are going to be on first-round rookie running back Najee Harris for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We know the Steelers, historically, under Mike Tomlin, they have liked themselves a three-down runner. We also know over the last 3 years, the team has not been very good in the run game. And incidentally, 3 years ago, well, that's the span of time they've been without Le'Veon Bell since he's moved on from the team or vice versa, whatever you want to call it. They wanted to get better in the run game. The owner came out and said we need to get better in the run game, and they spent a first-round pick on a back who, in a lot of ways, has a lot of similarities with Le'Veon Bell in his earlier part of his career. Le'Veon Bell was never a breakaway runner. Najee Harris isn't. Le'Veon Bell was a very good pass catcher. Najee Harris is. So you could see how this is really a marriage that makes perfect sense here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I look down, and initially, if you were quick, the early bird gets the bet. You got Najee Harris at 55.5 rushing yards, and that was a hammer on the over. Absolute hammer on the over. Well, it's at 59.5, and it's still a hammer on the over. I think we see him well over 60 yards on average. When I project this out and all my projections in for my player prop picks, that's an average of the long end. I think he's going to be closer to the ceiling than he is to the floor this week. So I'm still hammering the over. Right now, DraftKings, -110 on 59.5. If you got in early, 55.5, that was just a gimme putt. Like seriously, okay, you don't have to putt that. You get the birdie, bro. I'll take it, though. I'll still take 59.5, and I think this is going to be a big year for Najee Harris. The workload is going to be there. There's essentially no competition for touches in that backfield, and they are just going to feed him all day long. Moving on to the next game, revenge. I always make fun of revenge games because really, Mike Zimmer, revenge game is Cincinnati, Minnesota, in Cincinnati. How dare you let me leave and become a head coach? Anyway, this is a battle of two bad defenses, and usually that leads to fireworks, and that leads to a lot of overs potentially here. We could go on either side of this. I love the passing matchups here. I really love the passing matchups for Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. Kirk Cousins should have no problem against that defense. It doesn't have William Jackson any longer. On the other side, I think Joe Burrow is going to be just fine. He has a fleet of weapons. I'm not worried about Jamar Chase. It's just, it'll come back. I don't care if there's no white lines on the ball or whatever he was saying the other day. It'll come back. But I want to key in on the run game. Now, Dalvin Cook should have his way in this one, and that's what Dalvin Cook does. But Joe Mixon on the other side. We just talked about Najee Harris having no competition for touches. No competition for touches here in that backfield as well for Cincinnati. Giovanni Bernard is gone. He's already played this week for Tampa. He's out of the mix, and that was always the problem. Giovanni Bernard was so stinking good in pass pro. He really is. I mean, honestly, I don't think this is hyperbolic whatsoever. I think he's the best pass blocking running back of that generation of running backs. It's an aspect of the game that, bettors, fantasy players may not watch that often, but do yourself a favor, watch him. He's pretty nasty. He can ball out in pass pro, but he's out of the mix. Bro Mixon, there. Touches, yes, galore. Against a very bad run defense. What do you think is going to happen here? Mixon over at BetMGM, 15.5 rushing attempts. Minus 139, a little bit juice to that over, but give me the over. I don't care. I'll take that over there for Joe Mixon. I expect to see a lot of him in this contest, so give me that over. On to the next contest, San Francisco, Detroit. No Trey Lance as a starter. Maybe Trey Lance in the game. I don't know. Dan Campbell said they are preparing for him. On the other side, of course, you have a team in transition. Jared Goff is in there. They have basically no receivers. They have TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, etc. But I think the deficiencies are probably worse on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, the second half of the season, Detroit was really the worst defense in the NFL. Struggled mightily, and I don't think they did much to improve, especially when you look at the secondary. Jeffrey Okudah, I don't want to rule out young players at corner transitioning and becoming better players. It is such a steep learning curve for a lot of these guys to come into the NFL, but I don't think he transitions into a shutdown corner overnight here. And I want to take advantage of that matchup in fantasy. Absolutely, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. But for betting purposes, let's look at Brandon Ayuk. Right now, DraftKings has him at 44.5 receiving yards, minus 120. That feels like one we could just hit that over in the first quarter. Maybe not first quarter, but let's call it first half. Hit that over in the first half, cash the ticket, just sit back, relax, chill the rest of the game. Give me that over in that one. I don't care if it's James G piloting the ship here. Give me that over. Ayuk should have no problem here. And obviously, George Kittle's still the top target in that offense. But Ayuk, that's not going to take much for him to get that over there in that contest. Moving on to Arizona and Tennessee. Man, this is a nice matchup sort of across the board here. Kyler Murray has a really nice matchup. The run game is a good matchup, but that's a weird situation for fantasy purposes. James Conner and Chase Edmonds, they're both flex worthy, but for different reasons, and I don't love it. But I'm going to the other side of this contest where obviously you have A.J. Brown. He looks like he's good to go in this one. And you bring in Julio. And it's healthy Julio. It's not hurt Julio. Those are two different people. Healthy Julio, even at his age, can still be a dominant force. You get those two guys in there with a completely, over the last season and a half, revitalized Ryan Tannehill against a secondary that on paper is one of the worst in the league. Patrick Peterson's gone. You got you have a guy who hasn't played in 2 years. You have a rookie out there. It's a rough situation. And they're going to have their hands full with these two big-bodied receivers in Brown and Jones. So I'm not necessarily keen in on those guys, although we could talk about their overs as well. But how about this? Ryan Tannehill, 1.5 passing touchdowns, another over. People used to call me the Undertaker. I guess we're going to have to change the name here. But man, oh man, 1.5 passing touchdowns. I like that right there at minus 125. That also is on DraftKings Sportsbook right now. Hey, over at FTNBets.com, we got a couple resources for you too. If you wanted to get in on these things for free, you can just check this out. Our prop shop, it's kind of like the Google of sports betting. So if you wanted to look at Ryan Tannehill and you wanted to look in your state or whatever state you're close to that you can bet in, type in Ryan Tannehill's name in the prop shop and boom, it'll show you all of the different odds. and the different sports books you can play on. And if you haven't signed up at one of those sports books, just click on through the link. Boom, you're there. Sign up, get whatever bonus or whatever you get, and bet the over on Ryan Tannehill. Easy peasy right there. Moving on to Seattle, Indianapolis. Man, I love Russell Wilson. I love Russell Wilson because this guy throws to the end zone more than anybody else out there. That is a stat that we track over at FTNFantasy.com via our own proprietary data, FTN data. End zone throws. Love that Russ chucks the ball to the end zone. But I'm not actually going to play Russell Wilson's lines here. I'm really interested in just seeing what this offense looks like in general. They've talked so much in the offseason about how complex it's going to be. We heard from DK Metcalf, from Tyler Lockett, from Russell Wilson, that it's going to look very different than last year. And last year, second half of the season, very vanilla offense. It was very predictable, and that was part of their problem. But I'm not going to stay on that side. I'm going to go to the other side of this matchup. Much ado about nothing. Remember when everybody was freaking out about Carson Wentz, about Quentin Nelson? Remember that? Remember that time? Well, it looks like, Carson Wentz is going to play, and it looks like Quentin Nelson's on track to play. He's not guaranteed just yet, but that's good for Johnny Taylor. But Jonathan Taylor, I'm actually looking not at his rushing yards, but his receiving yards. Now, he's not a 3, 4, 5 catch a game guy. He's a, if we're lucky, 2 catch a game guy. But if he does get those 2 catches, he should have no problem getting up over 10.5 receiving yards at -110 on BetMGM right now. Easy on that one. I like the over there. He showed down the stretch. He's not a prototype passing down back. He's more of a throwback 2-down guy, but he's also not Derrick Henry in that he's going to average 1 catch a game. I think, like I said, probably closer to 2. Put him at like 34, 35 receptions on the course of the season. If he gets 2 catches, it's going to be hard for him to not get over 10.5 receiving yards in this contest. The Chargers and the football team. WTF every time I see it, right? Every time. The Chargers and the football team, you have a very good defense on that Washington side. Very good. That's a tough one there for Justin Herbert and company. And Austin Eckler being banged up doesn't help the cause. No, I don't have an answer to your question just yet, but I will tell you this. I'm getting a lot of questions about Austin Eckler and then who is the backup. As of right now, the primary backup is Justin Jackson. They also have Larry Roundtree and Joshua Kelly in that backfield, and I would expect a committee situation of some sort with everybody seeing touches if Eckler does not play. And even if Eckler is playing, I still expect to see Justin Jackson in this one. So hopefully that helps answer some questions, but we don't have the ultimate answer just yet. In this game, Washington, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'm a fan. No Curtis Samuel. He just went to IR right before we started the show here. Not a huge surprise. He's been dinged up. Can't seem to get healthy. And with Samuel, well, he could be out for 3 weeks. I mean, that's what an injury, or 3 games, technically speaking, is what injured reserve is. So it's not as bad as it once was. And sometimes still when you say it, you're like, oh, injured reserve. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's 3 games. It's not half the season or the full season. But I want to go to the other side. I do think this could have a little bit of interesting shootout potential in it, which means I want to key in on the passing game. And man, when you have a guy who can see double-digit targets every single week in Keenan Allen, and then you see a passing yardage line of a receiving yardage line of 54.5, that definitely piques my interest right there. 54.5 on FanDuel. I've seen this as high as 57.5. Might even be higher than that, but I saw 57.5 right before the show. So I'll take those 3 yards, no doubt about it, at -114, taking another over. I swear eventually I'll get to an under, but I'm not there just yet. So I'll take an over on Keenan Allen. I think Justin Herbert's going to look his way early and often. And let's not forget, no Hunter Henry in the mix. So Jared Cook, I know, Jared Cook, Donald Parham, they're not quite the same guy as Hunter Henry, so maybe an extra target or 2 even shifting over to Keenan Allen as a result. Let's move on to Revenge 2.0 here. I can't resist the joke. I know it's a bad joke, but you know what? 95% of my jokes are bad. Sam Darnold, sweet taste of revenge against his former team. Thank you, schedule makers, for this. We also get our first look at the Golden Boy, Zach Wilson, in this one. And good matchups for both of those guys. You have favorable for Darnold. I love every piece of the Carolina receiving game here. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, fantasy football, don't even think twice about it. Terrace Marshall, we're getting ahead of ourselves if we're trying to start this dude right now. So here's the advice. Keep him on your bench, see what you got. DFS, like on DraftKings, for example, at 3,000 min price, yeah, okay. Well, we're going to toss him in some lineups, but not in season long. Not in season long right now if you are playing there. On the other side, Corey Davis is interesting, but that's about it. And I want to kind of wait and see. Don't drop Michael Carter. Seriously? Why did you draft him if you're just going to drop him right now? Don't drop Michael Carter. Let's wait and see what we have with him. Give it a little bit, just a little patience, like Axl Rose once said. So let's go. DJ Moore. Back to my guy. 58.5 receiving yards against another one of the secondaries that we could say arguably one of the worst on paper. 58.5, minus 115 on DraftKings right now. Hammering me over on that guy. Houston, Jacksonville. Yeah, this feels like this is like a mid-season Thursday night game, right? With the color rush. That's the way we usually get these two teams. On paper, two of the teams that are, definitely at the bottom of the barrel this year. Jacksonville coming off of picking first overall. You don't pick first overall if you are coming off a good season unless you traded for that pick. And Houston, obviously, the debacle with Deshaun Watson. And it looks like probably a very good chance he's going to be inactive, like a healthy scratch every week. We don't know for certain, but he is this week. It's Rod Taylor, the starting quarterback there. And actually, there's an interesting opportunity. I'll give you two. I'll double dip here. A little bonus on this one. Both rushing yard props, both quarterbacks, both overs. Right now, the best line I'm seeing on Trevor Lawrence, mine and odds, is 14.5 at minus 130 over at PointsBet. You'll probably be able to find similar if you shop around. Use that prop shop over at ftnbets.com. Tyrod Taylor, best I'm seeing right now, 16.5. 16.5? Have we not watched this guy play football? He's one of the better running quarterbacks in the league. 16.5 at minus 110 on BetMGM. I normally bet a standard unit, just straight, always standard unit, but I had to put 2 units in on that one. That's how confident I am on Tyrod Taylor on the over there in terms of rushing yards. They don't have any weapons. Their backfield, combined age, it's like 100 and something. You see him, you have to do that math. That's how old it is. I don't have enough fingers and toes to count that one out for sure. I got to get the abacus out to count how old these dudes are in that backfield. Tyrod Taylor's, he's going to run a little bit. 16.5 is not going to be too hard for him to get the over on. Let's move on to a very anticipated game, a little bit of a rematch here with Cleveland and Kansas City, which is a very intriguing contest because of the playoff implications from last year. Cleveland, a surging team. I buy in on Kevin Stefanski. This dude knows what he's doing. Of course, we know Andy Reid knows what he's doing. We know Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey and Tyreek Hill are rock stars. But what about Odell Beckham Jr.? Now, obviously, in fantasy, he's what I call a love to hate for some people. People, no matter what he does, they love to hate him. I get that. He might have burnt you 2 years ago or last year. But 2 years ago, Freddie Kitchens, that was a debacle. So I'm just going to erase that one. Like, these aren't the droids you're looking for. Let's just forget about that season. Last year, first 7 games, not that great. But first 7 games, not really that great for Cleveland as a whole. I don't think Odell Beckham Jr. getting hurt was the catalyst for that team becoming better. I think it was they started playing football in September last year. Remember, it was a weird year, no preseason, and they finally started to gel. And it just so happened he also got hurt right around the same time. So I think this line of 50.5 receiving yards is simply put just too low. BetMGM right now, minus 111, too low. Odell Beckham Jr. hammering that over in that one. New England and Miami. Is this a Brian Flores revenge game? Again, so silly. But regardless, Miami's interesting. Now, no Will Fuller in this one. Remember, he's suspended. You have that backfield, which looks like it's going to be a pretty much a 3-man committee, 3-headed monster there. Myles Gaskin likely the lead, but Malcolm Brown will be in the mix. Savon Ahmed will be in the mix as well. On the other side, though, rookie quarterback starting, Mac Jones. You have Jacoby Myers, who I really like him. You have the 2 tight ends as well, because it looks like Hunter Henry's trending towards playing here. You got Jonnu Smith in there, very interesting move option at tight end. And then the backfield. Sony Michel's out. So that's not as complicated as it once was. You got Damian Harris positioned well to be the lead early down back. James White doing James White, catching the ball out of the backfield. Ramondre Stevenson's a little dinged up. So it does set up for a relatively big day in terms of workload for Damian Harris. But the question, does Damian Harris catch a pass? Now, last year, we did this. We did the Thursday night happy hour, which we'll still be doing this year. I'm not on it because I'm doing things like this this year. But that show, I coined a term, a one-play payday. Now, a one-play payday is this. All you need is one play, and you can hit the over. That's it. One play, cash the ticket, done. Now, I'll warn you, sometimes it'll happen with a quarterback rushing yards, and then they'll kneel. And then you go from having the over to having the under. But in this case, I don't see that happening. So the one-play payday, do you think Damian Harris catches a pass? If yes, here's your flow chart. If yes, bet the over on 3.5 receiving yards at DraftKings -110. If no, don't. It's that simple. But I do think he's going to have a catch in this game, and that's an easy over then for Damian Harris. Moving on to Green Bay and New Orleans. Jameis! It's Jameis time, baby. Marquez Callaway is set up for a really tough matchup in this one. If you're in fantasy leagues, should he be on rosters? Yes. Should he be started this week? Probably not. He's going to face, if he doesn't see a shadow from Jair Alexander, he's going to see a lot of Jair Alexander. It's going to be a tough one. Unproven guy. Love the momentum. Love the upside for this season. But week one, let's pump the brakes a little bit. You're going to see a lot of Alvin Kamara. This is a favorable matchup for Kamara in this one. But pump the brakes a little on Marquez Callaway just to be safe, right? On the other side, of course, Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams. And Adams in this one is set up to potentially see a shadow as well from Marshawn Lattimore, but I'm not really worried about that matchup. Adams is so stinking good regardless. And Lattimore coming off a down season. He allowed 8 receiving touchdowns in his covers last year. But let's go to MVS. I think sportsbooks still think that Marquez Valdes-Scantling is going to be a thing this year because 3.5 receptions is his line. Now, it is well juiced to the under, but sometimes I just take the gimme putt. Or this is one of those plays that you could group together in a parlay and, get some better odds that way if you really think this is a gimme putt. So we are taking the under on this line of 3.5. Odds -182, like I said. So it's a gimme putt, but it's not going to pay out that much if it does hit. However, you could bunch that together with some other bets that you like with odds in the similar range, or -200, -250, those types of odds. Group them together into a parlay. It's a good way to increase your odds and get a better payout there. But I just don't see much involvement for him. Randall Cobb is back in the mix. Obviously, you have Devontae Adams. You have Robert Tonyan as a tight end who can catch the ball. You might even see Amari Rodgers, the rookie, in there. It just 3.5 is a very ambitious line. And the odds, they also sort of say that as well. Moving on to Denver and the Giants. Man, if you like coverage, you want to watch some really good cornerback play, this is the game for you. These are 2 of the better secondaries in the NFL. James Bradbury for the Giants coming off a breakout year. Adoree Jackson. How about that? They got him for a bologna sandwich basically there. On the other side, Denver may not even have to start first-rounder Patrick Surtain. I mean, that's how loaded up they are. So it's a fascinating game from that vantage point. But I tell you what, I'm looking at the rookie running back for the Denver Broncos, Javonte Williams, coming off of a really impressive year at North Carolina, a true 3-down back. But they also have Melvin Gordon there. Now, if you're in fantasy, do you use him? Javonte Williams, that is. I think you can flex him. If you don't have anybody else to use at running back, you may have to use him. I have him at RB31 right now in fantasy football. But at RB31, I do think he sees more than 6.5 carries in this one. Right now, DraftKings line 6.5, -135 on the over. Juice to the over a little bit, but I'll take that. I'll take that all day long. I think he's going to be pretty involved here. We could very likely see double-digit carries, which means he absolutely smashes that over in this contest. I wouldn't be too worried about Saquon Barkley, by the way, if you are currently. Even 75% of Saquon Barkley is still better than a lot of other players out there. Let's wrap it up here with the Sunday Night Football contest between the Chicago Bears, Andy Dalton-led Chicago Bears, and the Los Angeles Rams. Good luck, Andy. Good luck. Yikes. That's a tough one. It's a tough one for Allen Robinson, who's going to see plenty of Jalen Ramsey, if not a shadow from Jalen Ramsey. Darius Williams still pretty good on the other side of that secondary as well. It's a tough one for David Montgomery. That run defense is no joke. The defense as a whole, no joke. It's a tough one for the Bears. On the other side, it is not a tough one for the Rams. And it's going to be really interesting. How does this offense look with Matty Stafford under center? What is it? I don't know. I think it's going to be better than Jared Goff. I sure as heck hope so. You have the receiving talent in Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. You have Tyler Higbee as a little bit of a wild card for fantasy purposes at tight end. And you have a backfield that, well, it was supposed to be Cam Akers. It's not. Now it's Darrell Henderson and the newly acquired Sony Michel. I'm not convinced Sony Michel is fully up to speed at this point. So that's where I'm keying in on in this game. Rushing attempts, I'll give you 2 on this one too. I'll give you a little bonus. Rushing attempts, rushing yards, both on BetMGM right now. Rushing attempts, 9.5. Now it is minus 189, so yeah, it's juiced to the under. But taking the gimme putt on that one, that may be, hey, there you go, a little parlay. Under on his rushing attempts and Marquez Valdez-Scantling's receptions. And then the rushing yards, 34.5. Obviously, they're not giving him too much efficiency there. 9.5 carries, 34.5 rushing yards. But regardless, that's minus 110. Happy to take that as well. I don't think he's very involved in this game this week. If you have him in fantasy, chill, wait. They acquired him for a reason and see this thing out over the next couple weeks. You don't have to rush to any judgment there just yet. But I am hammering those unders for Sony Michel. Somebody checking in here, Storyline 1984 got a comment for us saying, is Elijah Moore, is he the real deal? Lots of hype. Well, I think we're going to see because Jamison Crowder's banged up. Elijah Moore, and a lot of people made this comp, and I think if you watch him play, you see it almost automatically. There's a lot of Steve Smith to his game. An undersized receiver by conventional standards who plays much bigger than his size, plays angry, can make big-time plays. And yes, he will primarily be a slot receiver on this team, but that doesn't mean that he can't still be a big-time fantasy option. Now, of course, Elijah Moore can only do so much. So as Zach Wilson goes, so too perhaps it goes Elijah Moore. In fantasy football, I'm keeping this guy on a bench for sure right now. I'm not going to start him this week. The only startable option there for the Jets is Corey Davis. But yeah, I mean, well, is he the real deal? I can tell you, is he worth where he was drafted in the NFL draft? Yes, absolutely. Based on the evaluation, absolutely. Will he pan out? Hey, we don't know yet. But I am willing to take a shot on his upside over a lot of guys who really don't have much upside, like the Emmanuel Sanders of the world. I don't want guys like that on a fantasy roster because there's very minimal upside. I love Emmanuel Sanders as a player, but not on my fantasy squad. Whereas Elijah Moore, taking that scratch-off lottery ticket, baby. That's exactly what I'm doing there. All right, so before I get out of here for today, player prop-wise, here's our objective. We know we're not going to hit every bet. We know we're not. Anybody who thinks they're going to hit every bet is fooling themselves. Anybody who thinks they're going to get every fantasy decision right is fooling themselves. We know we're not going to hit every bet, but we want to play the highest percentage bets possible. Over at ftnbets.com, I do have you covered on that front. I have all of my bets for the week listed out, and I continually update this as new lines are coming in, etc. So you can go there. You can search out by the sports book. You can search out by the betting market, so rushing yards, receiving yards, etc. You can search out by the team. If you just want to look at particular teams, you can even search out specific players, whatever you want to do there. We have that, plus so much more at ftnbets.com. Promo code RATPACK there. Over at ftnfantasy.com, same exact promo code. Also ftndaily.com, our optimizer, chef's kiss, man. It's freaking awesome. Got to go check that bad boy out. But any of those, promo code still works. If you want the whole bundle too, we got that for you as well, which I think that's probably the way to go. But regardless, check it all out. Be patient. Bet the highest percentage possible plays with player props. And if you have not started betting player props, dip your toes into the water, all right? Just a little bit. It's 2021, man. High time to do so. All right, you can check me out on social media. On Twitter, I am at Jeff Ratcliffe. And, of course, on Instagram, I am at Jeff Ratcliffe. And I won't say this on Twitter, but I will on Instagram. You can slide into those DMs. Not doing any start sit questions, but a lot of great questions have been coming in recently on Instagram at Jeff Ratcliffe. I'm out of here right now. I will be back for this same show next week, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern. But on Monday, I'll also be back to do a Monday Night Football show, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And enjoy the football this weekend. I am Jeff Ratcliffe, and I'm out of here.